Welcome. Wherever you are right now, in your bed, on your couch, resting from a long day, this story is for you. It's for the part of you that feels tired. The part of you that's unsure what comes next. The part of you that wonders if things will work out. This story is quiet, like the soft fall of morning dew. But within it lies the strength of promise and the comfort of daily grace. It's the story of manna, bread from heaven, given to a people who were tired, uncertain, and learning what it meant to trust God. You are invited to settle in, to breathe, to be still, and to remember that even in the wilderness, God provides. The Israelites had been delivered, freed from the chains of Egypt, led across the sea on dry ground. They had seen Pharaoh's army swallowed by waves, and had watched their past disappear beneath the water. They were no longer slaves. But they were not yet home. They were free, but wandering. Hopeful, but anxious. And already, their joy was starting to fray. They moved into the wilderness, following Moses, who followed the cloud. They walked across dry lands, with little shade and little water. The weight of freedom settled onto their shoulders, in a way they hadn't expected. It was not the labor of brick and mortar anymore, but the uncertainty of each new day. Their children grew tired. Their animals slowed. Their stomachs grew empty. They began to feel it, the ache of hunger. Not only in their bodies, but in their minds. They longed for the comfort of what they knew, even if what they knew had hurt them. In Egypt, they had food. They had routine. In the desert, they had freedom, but no plan. And so the complaints began. They grumbled against Moses and Aaron. And in truth, they were grumbling against God. If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in Egypt, they said. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert, to starve this whole assembly to death. Fear makes us forget. They had cried out in agony under Egypt's whip. They had begged for deliverance. And when it came, they sang songs of praise. But in the dry winds of the wilderness, praise faded fast. Their memories shifted. Their perspective narrowed. They could no longer see the goodness of what God had done, only the discomfort of what he had not yet done. They were hungry, and hunger made them afraid. Still, God listened. He heard their grumbling. He saw their need, and he did not turn away. He spoke to Moses. I will rain down bread from heaven for you, he said. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way, I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. God would not just provide. He would teach. He would teach them rhythm, patience, and trust. He would show them how to rely not on stored-up strength, but on daily grace. Evening fell. The sun, pale and red, dipped below the edge of the desert. The camp grew quiet except for the occasional cough, the rustle of worn fabric, the hush of tired voices. And then they came. Wings against the dusk. Low, slow flocks sweeping in from the horizon. Quail. Birds by the hundreds, maybe thousands. They settled in the camp, surrounding the people. They came close enough to gather, easy enough to catch. And the people did. That night, they roasted the meat over open fires. They chewed slowly, as if they weren't sure it was real. Their bellies filled. Their limbs softened. And sleep came easier. But it was only the beginning. In the morning, the miracle continued. As the first light crept across the hills, a thin layer of dew covered the ground around the camp. As the sun rose higher, the dew dried and vanished. In its place, something new. A fine, flaky substance. Delicate. Light. White like frost. It coated the ground like snow that didn't melt. It sparkled faintly in the sun. The people looked at it, puzzled. "What is it?" they asked. Moses answered simply, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat." And that's what they called it. Manna. Which means, in their language, what is it? Because sometimes the most holy things arrive without warning, without explanation, without a name. It was unlike anything they had known. Not grain, not flour, not meat. Not something they could have invented. And every single morning, it was there. Enough for all. Each household was to gather one omer. About what a person would eat in a day. Those who gathered much found they had no surplus. Those who gathered little discovered they lacked nothing. It balanced out, not by accident, but by divine design. God was showing them something deeper than nutrition. He was showing them provision. Limit. Enough. Not too much. Not too little. Just enough. Each morning they would gather. Each evening they would eat. And each day they would be reminded, God is here. God is paying attention. God is giving what is needed. But there was a condition. They were not to keep any overnight. They were not to hoard it. Not to save it for tomorrow. It was a test of trust. Would they believe that the same God who fed them today would feed them again tomorrow? Some obeyed. Others did not. Those who tried to store it away for the next day found only rot. The manna grew worms. It turned foul. It could not be preserved by fear or by pride. It was designed for the moment, not for the next. This daily rhythm was meant to shape them, to slow them, to humble them, to teach them to live one sunrise at a time. They had lived as slaves to Pharaoh. Now they were learning to live as children of God. And children do not earn their bread. They receive it. They wake up and find it waiting for them. The manna came every morning, just as God said. Light as snow, soft as flour, covering the ground like a whisper. Every sunrise became a promise fulfilled. Every morning, a quiet mercy. But then came the sixth day. As the people went out to gather, they noticed something different. There was more. Twice as much. Instead of one omer, they had two. They brought it back to their tents, uncertain. Would it spoil overnight like before? Would it rot and stink? Moses gave them God's instructions. This is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow is a day of rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. Save whatever is left, and keep it until morning. They did. And for the first time, the manna lasted. No rot. No worms. No stench. It stayed fresh. Clean. Whole. The people woke the next day, the seventh, and found no manna on the ground. But they did not need it. Because on the sixth day, God had already given them what they needed. There was nothing to do now but rest. They stayed inside. They shared what they had. They sat in the cool shade of their tents. They watched their children play. And for the first time in their lives, they tasted the quiet peace of Sabbath. This was new. In Egypt, there had been no rest. Only labor. Only urgency. Only exhaustion. But now, God was giving them something Pharaoh never could. A pause. A breath. A space to simply be. The Sabbath wasn't just about stopping. It was about remembering. Remembering who they were. And remembering who God was. Not a master who demanded more. Not a taskmaster who punished slowness. But a father who gave daily bread. And told them to rest. Still, some went out on the seventh day to gather. Old habits die hard. Fear takes time to quiet. But there was nothing there. And Moses said, "How long will you refuse to keep his commands and instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. That is why on the 6th day he gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where they are on the 7th day. No one is to go out." Slowly, they began to understand. The rhythm was not a burden. It was a gift. Work, then rest. Gather, then stop. Trust, then remember. Their lives were no longer being shaped by the whips of Egypt. Now they were being shaped by the cadence of heaven. 6 days of gathering. 1 day of grace. A rhythm woven into creation itself. Now felt again, in the desert. Not because they had earned it, but because God is generous. And in that stillness, they began to heal. Days turned into weeks. The manna kept coming, faithful as the sunrise. The people gathered it in baskets, in bowls, in cloths held open by eager hands. Children learned the pattern. Families settled into the rhythm. And the wilderness no longer felt quite so wild. Still dry. Still vast. But no longer empty. Every morning, grace appeared on the ground. But God knew that even this miracle, over time, would begin to feel normal. And what feels normal is often forgotten. So he spoke again to Moses. "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it. Then place it before the Lord, to be kept for the generations to come. A single portion. 1 man's daily share. Saved, not to eat, but to remember." Aaron, Moses' brother, did as he was told. He filled the jar, not with fresh grain or bread they had made, but with something heaven had sent. And the jar was placed before the covenant law, in the tabernacle, where God's presence would dwell among them. That simple jar became more than a container. It became a testimony of hunger met with mercy, of anxiety calmed by faithfulness, of a people learning to live 1 day at a time. Because God was not just providing, He was teaching. And in the jar of manna, that lesson would live on. 1 day, children would point to the jar and ask, "What is that?" And the elders would tell the story. They would say, "When we were in the wilderness, with no fields, no flocks, no bakeries, God fed us with bread from heaven. We didn't make it. We didn't plant it. We couldn't store it. But it came. Every day. Just enough. It taught us how to trust Him." They would tell of how they tried to gather too much, and it spoiled. They would tell of the Sabbath, when nothing came, and yet they still had enough. And they would say, "We were not forgotten, even in the dry places, even when we were afraid." Because memory is what shapes a people. Not only what they experience, but what they choose to carry forward. So God told them to carry this. A jar of the impossible. A container full of provision. A daily miracle made permanent. The manna would not last forever. When they finally reached the promised land, when they ate from the produce of the soil, the manna would stop. Just like that. The season would end. But the story would remain. Because some things are too important to leave behind. Some mercies are meant to be remembered. Not only with our minds, but with our habits, our gratitude, our faith. As the days went by, the manna became familiar. No longer shocking. No longer met with questions. Just part of the rhythm. It appeared. They gathered. They ate. But some days, some hearts still felt empty. Not in the stomach, but somewhere deeper. A quiet ache. A longing not even food could fill. Because people do not live on bread alone. Even miraculous bread. Even manna. God knew this. He had always known. The provision was never just about calories. It was about teaching a nation what dependence looked like. Teaching a people who had lived under the whip how to live under grace. And it wasn't easy. They had learned how to survive. Now they were learning how to trust. How to let go of control. How to step into a new way of being. One where each morning began with open hands. And that kind of learning doesn't happen all at once. So the manna kept coming. Like a whisper. Like a promise repeated. Like a love letter written daily on the sand. It wasn't always appreciated. Sometimes they grew tired of it. In time, they would even say, "We detest this miserable food." Not because it was bad, but because their hearts were still healing. Sometimes even the best gifts can be misunderstood when we are weary. But still, God gave. He did not take it away. He did not grow impatient. He knew what they needed, even when they didn't know how to ask. And in that consistency, in that mercy, He was shaping their souls. It is still true now. We are hungry people, not just for bread, but for certainty, for security, for peace, for meaning. We want to know what's coming. We want to feel full. We want to gather enough, so we don't have to feel vulnerable again. But what if God's greatest gift is not the feast that lasts forever, but the portion that carries us through today? What if the real miracle is not never being hungry, but always being met? Every morning, every need, every fear. What if the true transformation comes not when we've stored up everything, but when we wake up and know, again, that He will provide, that He hasn't forgotten, that we're not alone, that something holy will be waiting for us in the quiet hours of the morning. And so the story of manna became more than a moment in the wilderness. It became a memory, a symbol, a sacred reminder that in the dry, uncertain places, God still provides. For 40 years, they ate what heaven sent, not because they were perfect, but because God was faithful. They were slow to learn, but He was slow to anger. They were inconsistent, but He was constant. And when their feet finally touched the land of promise, when they tasted the fruit of their new home, the manna stopped. Not because God had changed, but because the season had. Now they would eat what they planted. Now they would harvest from the ground. But they would never forget what it meant to be fed by invisible hands. The jar of manna remained, a silent testimony, a promise in a pot, a way of saying to the generations after, He met us, He carried us, He fed us, day after day after day. And now, as your own day comes to a close, as your thoughts begin to slow, as your body grows still, remember this: the God who gave bread in the wilderness is still giving. He may not send flakes on the ground, or meat in the dusk, but He is still near, still seeing, still listening. Maybe your wilderness looks different. Maybe it's a season of waiting. Maybe it's loss. Maybe it's fear, or emptiness you can't quite name. But God is not waiting for you to be strong. He is simply asking you to wake up with open hands, to trust that He will meet you in the morning, to believe that what He gives, whatever it is, will be enough. You don't have to gather for tomorrow. You don't have to worry how the week will unfold. You are not responsible for holding it all together. That is not your weight to carry. Tonight, your portion is peace. Tomorrow, your portion will be new. Because He is the God of enough. Not the God of scarcity. Not the God of pressure. He is the God who says, I know what you need, and I will not fail you. So rest. Rest in the truth that you are seen, that your hunger is heard, that your heart is known, that your story is not forgotten. Let go of the striving. Let go of the fear. Let go of the pressure to know what's next. He is with you now. He will be with you tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Just like the manna. Quiet. Faithful. Enough. Good night. And may you wake to grace scattered like dew, to mercy shaped like rest, to a morning filled with enough. Always enough.